Hey everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are rescuing this plant. I know it doesn't look like it needs rescuing, but let me show you what went wrong. Alrighty, so today another plant spotlight, and today we're focusing on my variegated Epipremnum pinnatum. As always with my plant spotlight, I'm going to show you the journey that the plant and I have been through together, and then I'm going to talk to you about everything that I've learned about this plant over that time. Now, this plant spotlight is going to be a little bit different because this is actually going to be a bit of a rescue mission. This plant is currently rotting. That stem over here doesn't even touch the pot. Actually, I noticed in June that the stem was rotting. So I've removed the rotten part of the stem, which means that this vine is actually currently just kind of hovering just on the pole. It's not actually potted up at all, and it's still giving me new leaves. So let's start with the actual progression of this plant first, and then I'm going to show you what I mean by rot and how I'm going to kind of compensate for it, or how I'm going to overcome this. Alrighty, I've got this plant, I believe, in January 2021, and it was really just like a vine with, I think, 3 leaves, 3 nodes on it. Straight away, because it's an Epipremnum, I know that they're going to be pretty easy to propagate in water, so I actually cut it into 3 single node cuttings. I popped them in water, I propagated them, and once they had sufficient roots, I gave them a little pot. So the first photo I was able to find of this plant is this photo that I've got right here. So that's after I already potted it up. So there are 3 cuttings in there in just a little 10 centimeter pot, and I popped it in my IKEA cabinet so that it can thrive and grow as quickly as possible. Right, so it really didn't take long. Within a month or so, I really had enough cuttings to start potting them up on the moss pole. So in March 2021, I put 3 cuttings on a moss pole. I have it in my normal aeroid mix, and I've got it on my normal 90 centimeter moss pole, and I'll link a tutorial to all of these things at the end screen. You know, this plant has actually moved across my apartment many times. It's been living in so many different spots, not necessarily because I wasn't happy with its growth, more so because other plants had to be moved, and just as a result of that, this one had to be moved. It is an Epipremnum. It is pretty happy with my natural conditions over here. It doesn't, you know, it's pretty easy going, despite the fact that it has variegation. Usually plants with variegation, you know, can be a little bit trickier because obviously the white parts are kind of useless. But this plant isn't super highly variegated anyway, so I don't think the variegation would make a huge impact on the plant and its growth. I'll insert a couple of photos in May and June. It was really just slowly starting its journey up that pole and started giving me those little fenestration near the midrib. So I know that it's happy. So I couldn't really find a good photo of this plant between June 2021 and March 2022. I'll pop in this photo over here. I believe it was in September, where you can see it just amongst other plants. You can't really see much on that photo though, but you can just see that it kind of continues growing, right? And I think the reason why I couldn't really find any photos was because I probably didn't take any photos. It went through this super awkward like teenager stage, like all of us do, where it was kind of just a bit weird. And I think you can still see that. Let me actually undo this whole thing, because this is really just its latest setup. These plants are separate. So this is my Epipremnum. Then I've got 2 syngoniums in the same pot as well. And they're all sitting just on like a mesh over here. So the good thing with this pot is I can fit 3 nursery pots in here. I can't really take these out. Their roots have tangled together. So it's kind of a mess. But basically there's 3 pots in this planter, 2 14 centimeter and a 20 centimeter, and they're kind of giving each other stability. They're holding each other together. And then they're actually on like a little grid, so they're not touching the bottom of the nursery pot. They're not touching the bottom of the planter, which means that I can pretty much just water as much as I want. Any excess water is just going to drain out of the pot, and then the pot also won't sit in water because it's kind of elevated a little bit. I'll take a photo of it so I can show you later. But basically, let me put this aside, and I'll just pop it in another decorative planter just to stop it from falling over. Okay, that's better. All right, I hope you can see this better now. So basically what I was trying to explain was that, you know, as it was approaching, as it was climbing up, there was this stage, and I hope you can see these leaves over here, where kind of the leaves were getting a little bit deformed. Like it's starting to you know, produce these splits, but the leaves were like really deformed. And honestly, I wasn't quite sure if it's something that I've done. Am I not giving the right conditions and so on? I checked online as well, and I saw that other growers seem to have a similar issue. Like, I mean, look at this leaf, for example. It's like super weird, right? Really deformed. So I wasn't quite sure what happened. So I didn't take too many photos because I just didn't really like the plant. So I just chucked it in a corner and I was hoping for it to sort itself out. And honestly, it did sort itself out. It seemed to be just like this weird teenager phase. So it was kind of just a bit weird. But as it started maturing, kind of it got itself sorted out. I didn't really do anything. Actually, what I did do though, because I put 3 vines on here, I actually took 1 vine off because the third one was kind of just being shaded by all these leaves, so it wasn't really growing. So I took it off, propagated more, and I'm doing a little experiment with that at the moment. So there's only 2 vines on here anyway, by now. But when the plant reached around this height over here and the leaves were all deformed, I was actually doing an experiment. I cut one of the vines, the one on this one on your right, and the one on the left I didn't cut. And I just wanted to see if maybe the cut kind of just slaps the deformation out of it. I don't know. So this was the first leaf after the cut. So it's still really deformed. But then the second leaf after the cut is this one over here, which was kind of nice. And then the third leaf after the cut went really nice and normal, kind of like exactly the shape that I was expecting. But the one that I didn't cut also sorted itself out, and it's giving me these amazing leaves over here. And it's also the one that has progressed much further. So the cut didn't really work, but I thought it was worthwhile experimenting. So yeah, by the time it reached its first 90 centimeter pole, so the 90 centimeter pole stopped over here, I then extended the pole sometime in, I believe, December, and then the plant started growing on that extension and started giving me these beautiful leaves. Now, it could also be that, you know, with summer, the warmer temperatures, the more sunlight, that maybe that caused the deformation to stop, or basically the deformation was because it wasn't getting enough light, humidity and temperature maybe during winter. Again, I'm still not sure what happened, but basically what I'm trying to say is if you have an Epipremnum and it's kind of in that teenager stage and it's kind of being deformed a little bit, I wouldn't worry too much. It's not necessarily anything wrong with it. I really didn't change what I do to it, but the plant still matured nicely and started eventually growing these normal leaves. Yeah, so by June, I noticed that the leaves at the bottom of the pole were kind of going yellow. So I started looking into it and I realized that this whole stem over here is just rotted, right? It was just completely black and yuck and everything. So the second one seems to be fine. It just seems to be the one vine, but it actually happens to be the larger one, the one that's still growing at the moment. So I didn't even really notice that anything was wrong with the plant because the plant was still growing. So I was like, yay, whatever. But obviously, once I saw it, I was like, you know what? Let's give this plant, or let's see what the moss pole can really do. So usually I would try and, fix it up straight away. But I was like, you know what? Let's give it a bit of time. Let's see if this plant can still continue to grow, despite the fact that it's not even rooted into the pot. It's not even touching the pot. It's purely growing on the moss pole, purely relying on the roots within the moss pole. And it's given me this leaf very recently. Now, of course, this leaf took a long time to unfurl, and you can also see that there's like an empty node in between over here. So it was giving me like nothing, and then it was giving me this new leaf. And it's now already pushing out its next leaf as well. So it's definitely growing. It's probably not going to grow to its full potential, given that it has limited room for roots and limited, like it doesn't even touch the pot and so on. So I do want to fix it up, but I just thought I'd give it a chance, right? Like normally a plant would not be able to survive and definitely not grow for 3 months without having a root system. So if it wasn't for the moss pole, this plant would actually be dead. Because I always thought about that in theory. I always thought, you know what, I probably wouldn't even notice if I have root rot, because the plant is just going to survive purely based on the roots within the moss pole. And yeah, this is proving me right. Honestly, I don't even know what the situation is like in the pot. We're going to look at it together for sure. We're going to have a little look at how bad it is. But yeah. Okay, so this is pretty much all I've got to say about the plant. I mean, I'll put this photo up on screen in June 2022, what it looked like, and when I first discovered, and you can see at the bottom over there, there's already no more leaves, and you can see there's like, the stem is kind of floating. So what I'm going to do with this today is I'm going to chop it. Normally I do my chop and extends at the exactly at the 90 centimeter mark, at the, but I think given that there are so many roots on the side of the plant over here, I kind of want to keep these. So I'm probably just going to do a chop and extend, and I'm really just going to probably chop the pole over here, pot it back up to make sure that all of these roots over here are going to go into a pot, and then I can extend it eventually once the plant has reached the top of this pole. Alrighty, so let's do it. And in the meantime, I kind of talk to you about anything that I've learned about this plant over the last few years. So first, I want to kind of take these roots and I kind of want to loosen them from the pole because I'd like to save as much of this root system as possible. And kind of based on this root system, I'll make my decision on whereabouts I should be cutting as well. So I feel like cutting over here would be a good idea. And then all of these roots, I'll pot up. So let me, first things first, I'm gonna take it off of its stake. And I'll be reusing this. All right, where did I say I'm gonna cut? Maybe around here. I'm just gonna cut the moss pole. Ideally, I would have probably made a cleaner cut through the actual stem with a clean knife, but yeah, I didn't have that handy and I'm kind of trapped now. Can't let go of this plant, otherwise it's gonna fall. And honestly, I mean, I don't need to be too careful. It's already rotting. How much worse can it get, right? All right, so here we go. And look at all of these beautiful roots over here. I mean, that is just exciting. So I need to somehow wrap them into the pot, but I'll definitely can do that. And I'm really curious to find out what's going on in here. So we're gonna do that in a second as well. So let me just, I'm expecting the worst. I reckon there should be nothing left in here. It should all be rot, huh? All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a new 20 centimeter pot. Ideally, I would like to remove as much moss as possible from the bottom part of the pole. And then I want to replace it with aeroid mix. So let's see how I go. There are roots in here. So it's like a careful balance between removing moss so the moss doesn't get too wet within the pot later on, but also I don't want to destroy the roots. So a little bit of both. There you go. I'm happy with that. Made a bit of room for aeroid mix, but didn't destroy any roots. Okay, aeroid mix. Pop a little bit of aeroid mix at the bottom over here. The part that goes into the pot. Alright, I try and catch all the roots. Alrighty, now what I'm trying to do is I'll take these roots and I kind of just twist them around in the pot. And any leaf that's now going to be covered by the potting medium, I also remove, so that the stem doesn't rot inside. Okay. So I'm kind of happy with that. I can now top it up with aeroid mix. And I know that's going to be off camera, but honestly, it's just me putting aeroid mix in a pot. All right, beautiful. So I've got aeroid mix not just within the pot. I've pretty much managed for it to be everywhere. That's all good. Just in case, I mean, this pole isn't super large, so I don't know if it really needs a stake, but I'll pop the stake back in. Because latest when I'll do an extension, and it's probably going to be due for an extension in a couple of months' time. Summer is coming. So I'm hoping, especially with the new pot and the new potting medium, that it's now really going to keep growing again. Especially given that we now tackled the rot issue. I mean, if it was growing with rot, then might as well. Then, I mean, it better grow without rot, right? All right, so it's now in a 20 centimeter pot with aeroid mix. Yeah, and the pole is probably like 140 now. So when I extend it next, it will go just above 2 meters. So a little bit taller than my usual plants, but that should work. Alrighty, sorry, I just had to do a bit of cleanup because the aeroid mix went everywhere. So I just popped it back in here. I need to do something with these syngoniums. They're definitely way outgrowing that pot. I think when spring comes, I'll pop them on the balcony, actually, the syngoniums. Why not? Alrighty, so let's have a look at this pot and what happened over here, because I'm just curious to find out if the whole pot is rotted, if the whole thing is like root rot. Yeah. Well, okay, yeah, I suppose that answers my question. So honestly, all of this, even the second stem, was rotted down below over here. So this definitely had root rot. So 100%, like this whole thing is just going to waste. I'm going to bin this. But yeah, look at these roots. That is 100% root rot, which means also I'll throw out this whole medium in here. There would be a lot of rotted roots in here. So yeah, okay, that's pretty much exactly what I expected. Now the question is still why I had root rot. I feel like maybe this medium is not as well draining as the one that I usually do. It's, I mean, I potted this one up a good year ago, so maybe the medium looks okay. All right. Okay. So good news, bad news. Bad news, it had root rot, which, you know, we don't like. We don't want root rot. So that's definitely bad news, which means that we still need to be careful, of course, despite the fact that I thought this would be really good. I think kind of like the holes at the bottom were kind of blocked and maybe it wasn't draining really well. So definitely there was some drainage issue. I haven't really found that with any of my other plants so far. So I'm a bit surprised that it happened with this one, but I think it would have been because the syngoniums were kind of shading the whole thing and it wasn't getting any airflow or any light for that matter as well. I reckon that's kind of the reason I found for myself, because I mean, whenever something goes wrong, I do like to have a bit of a lesson learned on the back of it so I can do a better job. So definitely what I learned from it is, you know, be a little bit more careful, make sure that airflow reaches also the bottom of the pole and also the pot in itself, not just necessarily the top of the poles. But the main lesson that I learned over here is that honestly, it doesn't even matter if your plant has root rot or not, because it can still thrive. It's still growing. I mean, it's not growing as if it wouldn't have root rot. If it wasn't for that, it would have probably grown much bigger. But the stem is still getting thicker and the leaves are still maturing and having the splits and having nice variegation. So, I mean, I'm absolutely not unhappy with this plant. I mean, the Cebu Blue, for example, over here, which hopefully doesn't have root rot, it started off being smaller than this one, but it actually matured faster. So maybe this plant could have been at that size already if it wasn't for the root rot, but I'm absolutely not happy. I'm absolutely not unhappy, right? So basically that moss pole, if it wasn't for the moss pole, that plant would have definitely died, right? So I love moss poles. Okay, glad I finally got that sorted. It's been on my mind for 3 months, but I wanted to kind of give it a shot and see if it's coming back by itself without me doing anything, and it honestly did. So that's nice, but I'm glad I've got it sorted. And look, I'll definitely keep you up to date and see if the root rot issue persists or what's going on. It technically shouldn't, because I got rid of all the rotted part, right? All of the rot was kind of from here downwards. So this new pole has a brand new start, and yeah, hopefully it's going to thrive again. So anyway, today was a little bit of a different video. I kind of tried to combine the plant spotlight also with a bit of a rescue mission, because you guys kept asking me, show us something that actually went wrong. So yeah, that's life. You know, we're looking after plants. They're living organisms. Not everything is always working out 100% the way that I wanted to. And that's totally fine. You just need to find ways to compensate for it, or, you know, you need to find ways to actually act accordingly and like rescue your plant. But I mean, that was a pretty easy one for me. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time around. Bye.